Okay, but really though, who doesn't love a good story, right? And today we're going deep, like way deep, into one from history.
Ooh, I love a good history deep dive. Sign me up.
You got it. It's a story about family and loyalty and honestly some surprising twists and turns along the way. You might know the name Zayd ibn Harithah.
Yeah, the name rings a bell.
Well, today we're going to go way beyond just the name and uncover this, honestly, really fascinating life of this early Muslim figure. He had such a unique relationship with the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. I think there are going to be some real aha moments as we unpack this.
I'm ready. Hit me with it.
Okay, so to really get Zayd's story, we have to rewind a bit, even before the time of Islam.
Okay, yeah, set the stage.
So he had a really tough beginning, He was captured as a child, sold into slavery, and then eventually ended up as a gift to Khadija.
Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, who of course later became the Prophet's wife, right?
Exactly. So think about this. Zayd was already in the Prophet's household even before the Prophet, peace be upon him, received his revelation.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So what was their relationship like during those early years? I mean, how did the Prophet treat someone who was, at that time at least, technically his slave?
Right. It's a great question. I mean, we know even before Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was known for his noble character, just his deep compassion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it makes sense that he treated Zayd with so much respect, so much kindness, never like property, not even for a second. And there's this really telling story from this time. Zayd's biological father, he eventually finds him, right?
Oh, wow.
Comes looking to take him back, even offers a ransom. But here's the thing. The Prophet, peace be upon him, doesn't just make the decision for Zayd. He leaves the choice totally up to Zayd.
Wow, that's powerful. Giving him that agency, that's huge.
Totally. And this is where it gets really interesting, at least for me. Zayd chooses to stay with the Prophet, even though, at least officially, it meant remaining a slave.
That's a huge decision. What do you think that says about their bond? I mean, that had to be a powerful connection.
Doesn't it? It really speaks volumes. Zayd's refusal to leave, it's a sign of such deep affection, such loyalty, a bond that went beyond any societal norms.
Right, because we have to remember the context here. In pre-Islamic Arabia, adoption was super common, and it was seen as a noble act.
Exactly. So when the Prophet, peace be upon him, publicly announces that he's adopted Zayd, even calls him Zayd ibn Muhammad, it sends a very powerful message.
It's a statement about their familial bond, a bond that went beyond just the social custom of adoption.
Right.
It was real.
It's deep and real. So we have this strong, strong relationship even before Islam enters the picture. And then Zayd becomes one of the very first men to convert.
Wow, that's amazing. Was that a difficult decision for him? I mean, given his, unique position?
It's a good question. Converting to Islam meant a whole new way of life. A way of life that, let's be honest, challenged the existing social structures in a big way. But Zayd's commitment, it seems like it was completely unwavering.
He was all in.
He was all in. He stood by the Prophet's side through those challenging early years, offered his constant support, his loyalty. It seems like for him, his faith and his bond with the Prophet, peace be upon him, were completely intertwined.
So it wasn't just that Zayd accepted Islam. He was an active participant in that early Muslim community.
You got it. And here's a perfect example. He married Zainab bint Jahsh.
Oh, wow. Zainab bint Jahsh, a noble woman, and if I remember right, the Prophet's cousin.
Exactly. And the marriage, it was actually arranged by the Prophet himself. That says something about how highly he regarded Zayd.
Yeah, definitely. And it really highlighted Zayd's place in that early community.
Right. But this marriage, it ends up being a catalyst for a really pivotal moment in Islamic history, a moment that brought some really big changes.
Oh, okay. This is getting good. I'm on the edge of my seat.
I know, right? I think this is a great point for us to take a quick break, and then we'll jump right back into this pivotal moment. It reveals a lot about how the social landscape of early Islam was shifting, really changing. Stay tuned. Okay, so before the break, we were talking about how Zayd's marriage to Zainab bint Jahsh became this pivotal moment in Islamic history. What happened? Why was it so significant?
Well, it's like we were saying, the marriage was arranged by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself. But, despite everyone's good intentions, it didn't work out. It ended in divorce.
And that must have been tough for everyone involved. But you mentioned it also led to a turning point.
Yeah, it did. It really did. It actually led to some pretty significant changes in Islamic social customs. It all happened because of divine intervention, really.
Divine intervention. Okay, now I'm really curious. What do you mean by that?
Well, after the divorce, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, received a revelation. And it specifically addressed this whole issue of adoption. It laid out a new way to understand family structure.
Oh, wow. And that revelation, it's in the Quran, right?
Exactly. Surah Al-Ahzab, verses 4 and 5. And what's so interesting is that it really clarified things that might have been ambiguous before, especially when it came to things like lineage and inheritance.
So, if I'm remembering correctly, this revelation basically changed how adoption worked in pre-Islamic Arabia. It set up a whole new framework for family structure, didn't it?
You got it. The verses are very clear. They say adopted children, they weren't to be considered the same as biological children when it came to things like lineage and inheritance.
The big changes.
Big changes. It meant from then on, adopted children would be known by their biological father's name, not by their adoptive father's name.
That's a huge shift. And it wasn't just random, was it? There was a reason behind it.
Right. It was all about establishing clear legal and social structures, creating a system that was fair for everyone, a system that was just.
So even though Zayd was so close to the Prophet, this revelation changed how their relationship was officially recognized, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Zayd wasn't known as Zayd ibn Muhammad anymore. He went back to being Zayd ibn Harithah. But it's really important to emphasize that this change, it wasn't meant to diminish the love and respect between them.
Of course, their bond was so strong.
It was. And that never changed. But this revelation, it brought those social practices in line with the divine guidance. The guidance that was coming through the Quran, guidance that was meant to make society more just, more equitable.
It makes you think, if the Quran was changing how adoption worked, does that mean Islam is against taking care of orphans or those in need? I mean, taking care of vulnerable people? That seems like such a central part of Islam.
That's such a good question.
Ooh.
And it's a really important distinction to make. Islam absolutely emphasizes caring for orphans, caring for vulnerable people. It's a core value. This revelation, he wasn't saying don't help others.
So it was more about clarifying lineage and inheritance.
Exactly. Under the old system of adoption, things could get really messy. This new guidance, it brought clarity, and that benefited everyone.
I see, that makes sense. So the legal stuff surrounding adoption was redefined, but that core emphasis on compassion, on supporting people in need, that never went away.
Never. It remained a cornerstone of the faith.
So what about Zayd after all of this? Did his relationship with the Prophet, peace be upon him, did it change at all?
Not at all. Their bond stayed strong. And Zayd, he just kept serving the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the growing Muslim community. That same unwavering loyalty, it never wavered. He was really a shining example of dedication and service. He even became a well-respected military leader, which, is a whole other side of him.
Military leader? Wow, I have to admit, I didn't know that about him. There's always something new to discover with Zayd, it seems. Tell me more about that, about his military leadership. What kind of challenges did he face?
Well, remember that the early Muslim community, they were dealing with a lot. External pressure, threats, and sometimes, sadly, that led to military conflict.
It was a difficult time.
It was. One of the big battles from that time, it was the Battle of Mu'tah. And Zayd, he was given command of the whole Muslim army.
Wow, he was entrusted with leading a whole army. That's a huge responsibility, especially in a situation like that. It speaks volumes about the trust the Prophet, peace be upon him, had in him.
Absolutely. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had complete faith in Zayd's leadership. He knew Zayd could handle it, navigate such a challenging situation. And Zayd, just like always, he rose to the occasion, showed incredible courage, incredible commitment.
So tell me, how did the Battle of Mu'tah turn out for Zayd? I have a feeling I know the answer, but...
Yeah. It's a poignant part of his story. Zayd, he fought bravely, as he always did, but he was martyred in the battle.
Oh, wow.
But even in his death, the depth of his bond with the Prophet, peace be upon him, it's so clear. There's this detail about his final moments. It really says it all.
I'm listening. Tell me, what happened?
Zayd, he died carrying the Prophet's standard. The flag, the symbol of the whole Muslim army. He was leading the charge, embodying the spirit of the community, and he held on to that symbol until his very last breath.
It's such a powerful image. It really speaks to their connection, doesn't it? A connection built on respect, shared faith, a shared purpose. Even in the face of danger, that bond, it never broke.
It never broke. He was leading the charge, embodying the spirit of the community, and holding on to that symbol until his very last breath.
It's a powerful image. Really speaks to their connection, doesn't it? A connection built on respect, shared faith, a shared purpose. Even facing danger, that bond never broke.
Never broke.
So we've followed Zayd's journey now through so many phases, from his difficult start, as an enslaved child, to his close bond with the Prophet, peace be upon him. We saw his embrace of Islam, his role in shaping new social practices, and now his courage as a leader, and ultimately his martyrdom. It's been a journey, and honestly a moving one. What are some key takeaways we should keep in mind as we reflect on Zayd's story?
Well, I think Zayd ibn Harithah's life, it gives us such a unique look into how the social landscape of early Islam was changing. We see how revelation brought changes to existing customs, like adoption. But those changes, they never went against those core values like justice, compassion, caring for the vulnerable.
It's like you said earlier, those changes were about making things more just, more equitable for everyone. It also makes me think about how, change is a constant, even within religious traditions. And sometimes, like with Zayd, those changes come about because of personal experiences, like even challenging ones.
Right. Zayd's life wasn't just about his own personal wins or losses. It was really woven into that bigger story of how Islam developed. And his story helps us see how those larger historical forces played out in real, personal ways.
Something that keeps sticking with me is loyalty, the power of chosen bonds. Zayd chose to stay with the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he could have left. He chose to follow Islam when it was a tough, even dangerous path. And he chose to fight for his faith, even giving his life. It's like a reminder that family isn't always about blood ties. It's about the connections we make based on shared values, shared experiences, and, a deep sense of love and loyalty.
I agree completely. Zayd's story, it's a beautiful reminder that the most meaningful bonds, well, they're often the ones we choose, the ones we build on shared principles, and of course that deep sense of mutual respect and love.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from his early life to his lasting legacy, a legacy that still inspires people today. As we wrap up our deep dive into Zayd ibn Harithah's life, what's a final thought we can leave our listeners with, something that will really make them think as they reflect on this story?
I think a good question to ponder is this. In a world where family structures are constantly evolving, what can we learn from Zayd's story about the true meaning of loyalty, of identity, about the power of those chosen bonds to shape not only our own lives, but even the course of history? I think that's something worth thinking about as we carry Zayd's story with us.
Zayd ibn Harithah, a name that goes way beyond just a simple historical account. We've seen his journey from enslaved child to beloved son, witnessed his embrace of Islam, and explored his role in shaping those early Islamic social practices. It's given us a lot to think about the history of Islam, and even about our own lives, our own values.
It really has. It's a story about love, loyalty, faith, and how social customs, they're always changing. Zayd's life is a powerful reminder that history is made up of so many individual stories, each with its own, complexities and lessons. And those stories, they can make us rethink what we thought we knew. They can help us understand the world in a new way.
As we finish up our deep dive into Zayd ibn Harithah's life, I hope you all come away with a sense of just how much impact one person can have. His story shows us that even when things are tough, individuals can make a difference, shape communities, leave a legacy. His courage, his loyalty, his willingness to embrace change, those are qualities we can all learn from.
That's beautifully said. And as we go on with our own lives, maybe we can all take a moment to think about our own choices, our relationships, the values we hold. They all shape the world around us in ways big and small. We're all part of history, and each of us, we can all do something meaningful, just like Zayd.